Hi, I'm Patrick Collins, Vice President of Space Renaissance International. I'm sorry I can't be with you today, but I hope you have a successful conference. I want to talk about what I think is important right now. Europe is in a terrible economic crisis. And of course, so is the USA and Japan. To solve this, we have to clearly understand the problem. Of course, there are various problems, and the structure of the EU is a major one. But another one is this. The process of industrialization is a success. The centuries of economic growth triggered by the European Rinascimento have changed the world and released us from much of the labor that we used to have to do. We now use huge energy sources and many different kinds of machine to do much of the work that we used to have to do. In addition, recent unbalanced policies have shifted many activities to low-wage countries, not just factories, but call centers, software writing, and many other kinds of work. This book discusses this problem. So we urgently need to find some new industries which will expand to large scale in order to provide incomes for millions of people. One reason this hasn't already happened is due to a major distortion in the history of technology. One of the very greatest European inventions, absolutely epoch-making, was the development of space rockets. The first successful flight to space took place on 3rd of October 1942. That evening, the leaders drank a toast to space travel, which they planned to start after the end of the war. So why has this amazing European invention still not been used to enable space travel? Well, I think you know the story. The non-European countries, USA and USSR, kidnapped all the rocket engineers and forced them to build thousands of long-range missiles for the next 50 years. What an incredible waste. Trillions of dollars wasted. In addition to suborbital rockets, German engineers also built the first piloted rocket planes, hundreds of them, to defend against enemy bombers. After the war, they planned to combine these two projects and make suborbital passenger vehicles, like this. Space travel is one of the greatest engineering achievements in history. It opened the solar system to the human race. But all we hear about World War II technology is the Manhattan Project to build nuclear bombs. So frankly, present-day space development policy, started by the USA and USSR, is mistaken. It uses huge amounts of money, but for projects of little economic value. The space industry sells no services to the general public, except for TV, so it creates very little employment, despite using tens of billions of dollars of government investment every year. From the business point of view, the most economically valuable project today is to develop passenger space vehicles. If we start with suborbital vehicles, we only need very little to build a prototype, about 100 million euros. Spread over a few years, that's just 1% of what European space agencies use. And the technology is well within the capability of Italy's aerospace industry. But we need wider public awareness of the feasibility and the economic benefits of this project, which uses still unexploited technology from 70 years ago. Now, the economic value of developing space tourism services is easier for aviation people to understand than space industry people, who've never had to sell popular services to the general public. In the USA, the FAA, not NASA, is creating the regulations for space travel. In Japan too, the Japanese Aeronautical Association has already held 5 symposia on space travel, while the Space Agency has never held one. In England, the Royal Aeronautical Society has held 3 conferences on space travel, versus none by the Space Agency. And the aviation industry also knows about large scale. For example, do you know how many passengers flew on airlines during the year 2000? More than 1 billion passengers. And do you know how many passengers flew in the year 2010? More than 2.5 billion passengers. That's millions of passengers every day. The Wright brothers surely never imagined such huge growth. So how far do you think space travel could grow in the 21st century? Of course, that depends on the price. And Burt Rutan says that a short suborbital flight could eventually cost less than $1,000. So I suggest our target should be a system capable of carrying passengers to space for a price of a few thousand euros. At a price of a few thousand euros, millions of Europeans will fly to space every year, which will generate billions of euros in revenue. And once started, space tourism should grow through the 21st century, just like aviation did in the 20th century. So how about 1 billion passengers traveling to space in the year 2100? Of course, another huge advantage of this scenario is that young people all love this idea. Just ask any young person if they'd like to take a trip to space. For sure they'll say, "Sì, naturalmente." But they don't know how easy it is, and how a growing space industry can solve their problems, the first one being unemployment. I don't have time to show many illustrations, but space tourism will grow through 3 phases. In order to start suborbital services, we need a spaceplane, such as the Ascender, designed in Britain. The prototype will take 3 years to build, and a couple of years to test fly and receive an airworthiness certificate. The second phase is an orbital passenger vehicle. As an example, this 2-stage spaceplane, SpaceCab, is based on Ascender. SpaceCab is a first small vehicle carrying just 6 people. But being reusable, it will have low operating costs and will enable companies to learn how to raise reliability and reduce costs, just like airlines have done for decades. And once we have orbital travel, we'll have orbital hotels. In the USA, Bigelow Aerospace has become well known for its plans to build space hotels. But studies have also been underway in Europe for a long time. Here's a German company design for a single module. And here's a design using lots of the modules developed in Europe for the International Space Station. And then the third phase of space tourism will be lunar travel. I guess you've heard of the US company Golden Spike, set up by ex-Apollo project managers to sell lunar travel services. I don't know if they'll succeed, but lunar travel is not far beyond orbital travel. It needs additional infrastructure, but no engineering breakthroughs. So we should see space tourism grow through these 3 phases. In the 2020s, suborbital flights should cost a few thousand euros. In the 2030s, orbital flights could fall to a few tens of thousands of euros. And in the 2040s, lunar flights could fall to hundreds of thousands of euros. This is entirely possible. But whether it happens or not depends on whether we start. And then I think this 21st century scenario is not so unrealistic. We have the technology and the demand. We just need to get started. Thinking about this, I feel the situation is so similar to the time just before the Rinascimento. The traditional idea that space flight is only for government staff at extremely high cost has now completely reached a dead end. And it's about to be proved wrong. Once the new ideas began to be accepted, students came from all over Europe to Italy to hear researchers such as Galileo Galilei to learn revolutionary new ideas, to discuss them with friends, to learn how the old ideas they'd been taught at school were really wrong and new ideas were true. Today, the only partial equivalent is hot scientific research fields like genetic engineering, nanotechnology, and of course the internet. But these aren't enough, and they make people spend their lives in front of screens. And they're also eliminating many other jobs. For example, you surely know that robotic cars are just about to start eliminating drivers. That will mean millions more jobs disappearing. But just think of the intellectual excitement among young people designing new space hotels. They won't be able to sleep. They'll be having such fun thinking up new ideas and working them out in detail, planning the construction and operation and maintenance, and the design and the marketing, and literally unlimited new possibilities. Even just the first phase of suborbital space trips, designing and making and operating and maintaining the vehicles and spaceports, and all the related jobs, will be fantastic. What young person wouldn't want to work at a spaceport? This will become the 21st century equivalent of working at an airport 100 years earlier. There are already several spaceports in the USA waiting for services to start, and some studies in Europe, Sweden, Scotland, Spain. But nothing concrete yet in Europe, and still no vehicles. And then what vehicle is going to be the suborbital DC-3? You surely know that most types of aircraft used to sell only hundreds. But the DC-3 sold more than 10,000. The DC-3 was just perfect for the needs of the airlines, and sold and sold and sold. There's going to be a market for thousands of suborbital vehicles, if they can carry passengers at a few thousand euros per person. Sadly, it's clearly not Spaceship Two. Because of its design, it can't get very cheap. I hope they get it working soon, but it's not the suborbital DC-3. So perhaps that can be designed in Europe. Finally, I have to mention one more colossal benefit of developing space tourism, and that's its contribution to world peace. These days, it's sadly clear that warmongers have huge influence over the so-called Anglo-Saxon governments. Without even discussing past history, anywhere in the world today, USA, UK, Canada and Australia agree almost immediately to attack other countries and start killing people. When in every case, diplomacy would be more effective, and although the resulting death and destruction is far worse than the problem they claim to be solving. Of course, the aerospace companies that make bombs and missiles, and their owners, profit greatly from this. But everyone else loses. Well, our space renaissance will create far more work for aerospace companies than all of these wars, while preserving peace and strengthening economic growth worldwide. I've tried to express this in this cartoon. All in all, Space Renaissance International offers by far the best scenario for a peaceful and prosperous world through the 21st century. We offer the most realistic and attractive vision of a world open to an ever-improving future, in which we also protect our home planet Earth as more and more industry gradually moves out into space. So we just have to spread this knowledge and provide a detailed step-by-step path to achieve it. We must start with a small suborbital passenger vehicle that costs little to develop and will be able to fly passengers for lower and lower prices as they build more and more. And young people will take it from there. Well, as I said, Europe, including Italy, urgently needs some major new industries. And space tourism can start at very low cost and can grow almost without limit through the 21st century. Thanks for listening.